113th Contact, Sunday, August 6, 1978, 8:31 p.m., pages 194, 206. Billy says it has, once again, taken quite a long time before you yourselves have endeavored around the contact again. But I understand why and don't want to give you any reproaches over it. On the other hand, this also isn't entitled to me. Have you endeavored around us in the meantime? Quetzal says no, we have omitted that because the recent events weren't such that our interests would have been directed toward them. Billy says that, in and of itself, is a pity, but how, then, do you imagine that now, everything should really go on? Semyaza says that is still unclear to us, for too many things have changed, which has destroyed all our plans. Billy says, does this mean, now, that everything with the mission is destroyed so far that all previous pre-plannings have become obsolete? Quetzal says that is, unfortunately, of correctness, for not one single plan can still be implemented, according to which everything must now be newly planned in every respect and then carried out accordingly. We ourselves are no longer in a position to lead these concerns of a new planning, which is why we had to pass it on to the High Council. Billy says, and what does it say about this? Quetzal says, do you really want to know that? Billy says it must be, even if it should be hard. But see, it is important for me, and why it is, you know very well. Quetzal says, I understand, then it should be the High Council was for the fact that all contacts for the human beings of the earth should be broken off immediately and never be resumed again. It justified this with the fact that despite all attempts, the members of your group have previously only endeavored in very few cases around the actual task and its fulfillment and around the necessary change in themselves. In consideration of this, it is completely incomprehensible and absolutely irresponsible, for these group members would and are precisely those who have been oriented and informed in the best way about the task and its meaning and fulfillment. But the fact that only very negligible successes and fulfillments of duty appear, this is something that is incomprehensible in any form and that even points to indifference. In various cases, group membership is only existent for the sake of sensationalism and for similar motives. A true interest in the fulfillment of the task and, consequently associated with this, also the resulting activities and works, etc., is only present with a few group members. In the others, the very erroneous view prevails, that the group members would still be very far behind in their evolution, since they are, after all, earth human beings and so on, whereby a right can be derived, that forbearance is to be practiced with them. But this is, and this is also our opinion, not expedient, for there is no right that allows such forbearance in an unjustified form. It is. Billy says now, he has changed sides, Quetzal. Quetzal says, I don't understand. Billy says, I'll explain it to you afterwards, once you've finished your speech. Just know that it was exactly 8:40 p.m. and 13 seconds. But just go on. Quetzal says, it is incomprehensible that Earth human beings, such as the group members, appeal to such illogical excuses, for the knowledge imparted to them so far is more than enough for them to realize that there is no right of forbearance in the form mentioned. There is only a right to fulfill one's duty in every respect, and thus also a right to fulfill one's evolution, as well as a right to endeavor in all progressing things and matters. It is quite childish to appeal to the fact that forbearance must be exercised because the group members are, after all, Earth human beings and, thus, still far behind in their evolution. If, through the knowledge already transmitted, the teaching of the Spirit would have already been followed even only in half, then the interest in the fulfillment of the task and the interest in the fulfillment and observance of the teaching would have already risen so far in the individual group members that only very small failures would have been registered. But since the interest in the fulfillment of the task wasn't present but, rather, only an interest in sensationalism and the like, this had to lead to continuous failures that become more and more malicious and to the slow decay of the group. For these reasons and in consideration of the fact that so far, still no significant change has altered the situation, the High Council has issued a statement that all contacts should be broken off for all time. After everything that has happened so far, the High Council can no longer realize any change, except through the toughest regulations and even through force, which speaks contrary to all law and against all reason, however. But solely the intercession of Semyaza, Patar, Player, and of mine kept the High Council from even making a regulation that, so far, has never been made by it. Billy says you did that for us idiots. Semyaza says sure, and somehow I must agree with you about the designation, idiots, because this time, the things surrounding our contacts are very bad. Some other time, the High Council would issue a determining order, for through the wrong conduct of the group, even we ourselves and our own mission would be endangered. Therefore, if things should happen once again, like what was previously provoked by the group in complete recklessness and in rebellion, then this time, the decision of the High Council would stop everything, without any possibility of a later change. This means that now, other means must be brought to application in terms of all matters surrounding the group and its existence and task fulfillment. Billy says, and how should that look? Quetzal says regulations of a disciplinary form must be created by you yourselves, by those who exhibit a certain sense of responsibility, and these are to be strictly followed without exception, unless there is a true impossibility for duty fulfillment. Violations, and to be sure, in even just a single form, must be punished for the time being immediately and unalterably by an irrevocable expulsion from the group. Billy says, and if this dwindles more and more, what then? Quetzal says it is calculated by the High Council that if this happens, then under the new plans, at least 3 group members are still sufficient to organize everything from the ground up and still fulfill the task truthfully and with good interest. Billy says that was actually a question that I wanted to ask you. But do you yourself also think that this is right, what the High Council has concocted and contrived? Quetzal says we are all of the conviction that this advice is of correctness. Billy says, well then, look here, there I have the revised statutes and regulations for our group. Please read through it once and then tell me what you think of it. Quetzal and Semyaza read the statutes. Billy says, and? Quetzal says you've grasped the things very well, and what is written as regulations is probably the only possibility by which Earth human beings will introduce themselves into an important order. In my judgment, these statutes correspond exactly to that which must be put through. Billy says, is that? Do you really mean that seriously? Quetzal says that is of correctness. Billy says, man, son, you directly take my joy away. I was of the opinion that I could let out my anger on you because I was of the view that you wouldn't agree with everything. And now this, my son. You can just spoil all the joy for a person. Quetzal says that wasn't my intention. Semyaza says, ha 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 ha, Quetzal, you actually fell for it. He is truly very glad that you are of the same view as him. Ha ha ha, his jokes are often strange, and you may not always take all his words seriously when he holds certain moods in himself. You should observe him better when he speaks with you, ha ha ha. Quetzal says, is that really so, my friend? Billy says, certainly, our golden angel has seen through me. I'm really very glad that you find everything good, for otherwise I would have had to howl around, and because a rejection on your side would have meant that I would have actually and irrevocably thrown down the pickaxe. Quetzal says, oh, then that is understood. Yes, it is very well so, but in no way may an exception come about, except with a provable impossibility. Billy says, and what do you think, girl? Semyaza says your draft is very good, but it is still missing an important point, which you still have to add to these statutes under all circumstances, so namely in reference to compensation for you and for all your work, by which also the existence of your wife and your children should be secured. Billy says that is as. Quetzal says this time, you may also give no objection. It must be in such a way as what Semyaza just declared to you. We will still give you the necessary instructions about that after our conversation. This is unalterable. Billy says okay, maybe you're right. On the other hand, since I have already been so hard in the statutes, I probably also have to give way once. Semyaza says that is very fair of you. Quetzal says that is of correctness. But now listen, you still have to work a few more clauses into these statutes, in reference to the reception of candidates into the core group. These should be determining rules, which require a test. Billy says are good, yes. Here, I have questionnaires for this specific purpose because I myself have already come up with this idea. Do you want to see? Here they are. Quetzal says that is very good. Quetzal reads the questionnaires, 125 questions, that is very good, but I will still transmit some more from me to you, about 25 of these. At a later point in time, however, if everything finally takes its right course and everything is handled in accordance with the plan, and if also the wrongful acts and the betrayal as well as the lies and slander in the group's internal circle are finally resolved to a great extent, then these questions and their answers should no longer be relevant. Billy says, and what do you think of the fact that I have written that not a single question may be answered incorrectly or not answered at all, and that through this, no reception will take place if even only a single question is answered incorrectly or not at all? Quetzal says, like what you've written here, the learning time should cover 2 years. Accordingly, the arrangement is very good, that no reception may take place if even only a single question isn't answered or is answered incorrectly. The full answering of all questions presented here is justified because this can and should be expected of the group members without exception. This is so even when it concerns Earth human beings. Like what you've written here, this group, in regards to the teaching of the Spirit, represents something like an elite, of which such things should also be expected. Billy says, you see, that's what I think too. Quetzal says it is fair, even according to Earth human concepts. But it is still missing other things, which you have to add effective immediately. No new arrivals should hold exercises in the Saha Center anymore, unless they have passed a corresponding test with questions, which I will also prepare and transmit to you, and this also shouldn't be relevant anymore at a later point in time, if everything is operating well together. Billy says, good grief, just today I registered someone new. Quetzal says, then cancel that by means of your speaking device. Come, I'll help you. Billy says, Miranos 5.
Miranos 5 sagt ja, ich bin da. Billy sagt Agapula, Hützet Apostroph hab ich münd der nimmer ist Zentrum in Natur. Hesch verstande? Miranos 5 sagt ja, ich han verstande. Billy sagt gut, ciao. Miranos 5 sagt ciao.
Quetzal says, your mother tongue isn't easy to understand. Billy says, oh, it is clear already. Quetzal says, so the Saha Center should only be allowed to be used in the future by persons who have passed a corresponding test, which I myself will prepare for you. In addition, these candidates should be given a time of 6 months for teaching in every relevant respect. Billy says, good, I'll arrange it like that. By the way, for the testing for reception into the core group, I thought that 2 hours of time should be assured to the test participants. What do you think about that? Quetzal says there should be 3 hours. Billy says 2 hours, my son, that should really be enough. Quetzal says in and of itself, certainly, but leave some additional tolerance time. Billy says okay. But how should it work with make-up time, if prescribed times can't be kept? Quetzal says concerning that the following is to be explained also here, no exceptions may be made anymore, unless there is a verifiable inability to comply with the time. Reasons such as the journey would be too expensive, etc. cannot be valid. Also appointments, etc. cannot be considered. Even here, the rule is valid from